Шановні колеги,
Dear colleagues, we continue.
Dear colleagues, the topic of our current press conference, why the Odessa Port Plant was not put into tender and what will happen next. We have Igor, Bilous, head of the State Property Fund. Dear friends, I'm here to explain why the tender was not held. Yesterday at 6 p.m. the final submission came to its head, and we recognized the tender as void because we received no tender submissions. From the moment when we announced the tender, we had negotiations with 20 potential investors. Out of that, 8 had signed the confidentiality agreement and started review of the materials. Finally, we have got 3 participants of the tender who proceeded with the submission of all the documents, finalizing with the bank guarantees, etc. After very active discussions and after analysis of the documents. By the way, many officials participated in those discussions, not just me. Yesterday we had final dialogues where the major issues were formulated, and we have got understanding why investors had not joined that auction. There were several factors which influenced this the lack of demand for this. I cannot disclose the names of the companies, but I can mention geography of the potential investors. We had no Ukrainian investors. We had no investors from the aggressor country. We had investors from the United States, from the Netherlands, from Turkey, from Oman, from Poland. Also, we had several dialogues with Brazilian investors and with the Alger investors. We had several negotiations with the institutional investors, with the portfolio investors, but we did not come to final discussions. So the doubts of the investors were raised by the following factors. $193 million of the debt of DF, and plus proceedings in the Stockholm Arbitration Court. Some investors expressed their concern and wished restructuring of that debt. Also, the problem with the Nortima company. There are several court proceedings, but Nortima is one of the most important. All the investors would like to get protection from the state as to the court litigations in the party in the past periods. All the investors are very much concerned about the ban on repatriation of dividends. Although we spent a lot of time with the NBU trying to convince investors that they will be allowed to do this. So there is a problem with the dividends and the problem with the non-return of bank guarantees, which amounts to 5% of the property value. So the investors see these risks. Another factor which influenced negatively the absence of tax privileges and preferences for investors. I would like to cover this in more detail. Today, Ukraine competes for the global capital. This is global competition market. There is global investment market, and we pointed out that in other countries which wish to involve investors, the investors have tax privileges. We had started discussions on this issue. So we need to have in the future efficient instruments of tax privileges for future investors. Also, all the investors pointed out that 45 days are not enough to privatize such a huge industrial object. Of course, we predicted this, and from the new year we started negotiations with investors. But all the investors paid attention to this object seriously only after the announcement of the auction, and we found out that 45 days are not enough. Some investors appeared unable to submit their tender requests, and high price of the Odessa seaside plant OSP price is exaggerated against the background of political and other risks. So we have to recognize that the situation in the economy in general and the enterprise, the number of problems in the enterprise itself prove that the price is exaggerated. That's why we came to conclusion that we have to review the auction conditions, and the price is one of the items that should be reviewed. Nevertheless, I would like to point out that the interest to this enterprise has not shrinked, and the negotiations continue. I believe that those people who show their interest in this asset, they will remain with this, stuck with this interest. And also, I would like to mention that all the investors are interested in a long-term investment, and they do not take into account the temporary decrease in prices, temporary decrease in prices for ammonium in the global market. And we have learned lessons from this process. We got many questions, we answered many questions, we spent many hours in communication with investors. We reviewed a lot of underlying problems, and the homework which we had done during this auction, we came to conclusion to bring the Odessa seaside plant to the auction for the second time. The second round of the auction will be started by the end of summer, on the condition that we would have an opportunity to restructure the debt. Investors were investors from the United States, from Turkey, from Arabic countries. They had preserved their interests. So we have to learn the lessons from this process and to respond in right way. By the way, the OSP makes open doors for the energy privatization, which we have scheduled for the autumn, and actually the list of energy enterprises prepared for privatization remains unchanged. So the lessons that we had learned will be very useful for that future energy auctions. We have received a lot of the confidentiality agreements, and we are ready to continue this work very proactively. Dear colleagues, do you have questions on the topic?
And what is the discount for the secondary contest? There is such provision in the legislation. It's a good question. We discussed this issue in our working group. We have foreign experts there. And previously we had the norm 30% discount. I speak about it openly. Maybe we will use this norm. And now there are consultations on the way. And the decrease of price is the most simple thing we can do. We understand that we should do this. And we speak about starting price in the auction, and what will be the final price, time will tell. And I'm more concerned with the issue in what way we will be able to negotiate restructuring of the debt of DF Group. This is important and sensitive issue because not all investors are ready to cooperate in this with our counter agents. There are some options, we discussed them. And NEC Naftogaz is the part of this negotiation. And we should carry out this process in order not to increase the volume of sovereign debt of Ukraine in this case. And we should provide comfort to investors, and they should understand the mechanism proposed and how it and what the results they will get. Additionally, I would like to say, in order for you to understand, the discussion we reached the results that people who are ready to buy. We discussed the issue, what will be done in the period between signing and getting money. So this period is short, and this is also a matter of concern. And after the investor wins, he has, for example, 7 days to sign the contract, and they have 30 days to make payment. And this period is rather short, especially taking into account that in the contract there will be some conditions provided by investor that should be carried out by the state, so to correct some things. And maybe the period is too short and we should extend it. So we put this norm into the future law on privatization that we will present. And 45 days is not enough, and 30 days after the signing and payment, it's not enough because some conditions they ask the state to undertake, so they require serious international consultations at that level, so it takes time. Do you have other questions? Please ask. Introduce yourself. Madam Zvani, tell us, please, is there any deadline in selling the plant, and does it influence, and do political issues influence special criminal cases connected with the plant? Thank you for your question. I told you about the criminal cases, and I will tell you about investors. They want to see that the state protect investors in all previous periods that were in the history of the plant, and they do not want to have any relationship to such events. This is a broad issue, and of course the state is ready to do this and to protect potential investor. And for this, investment office is created under the Prime Minister, and there is a position what we are ready to do, and these conditions are reflected in the initial price that we will propose for the auction. And as an investor should identify the risks he is ready to take and not to take at a price. So about the criminal cases, of course, investors don't like this, and they work with lawyers who provide consultations on this, and sometimes these explanations are critical, and we believe that they are not so critical as investors believe, but we understand that we sell and they buy, and they work for a decrease and we work for increase, so this is a commercial operation, and in any case we do not hide the risks and the consequences. The matter of investor to analyze these risks and to make proposals, and there are several contracts that were submitted. You should understand that all the documents that were submitted, they were submitted, and we only wait for banking guarantees that would start the auction. Unfortunately, we see that there is a fact like this as of today. Artem Alien, Yellow UAE. You stated several times that privatization of the plant will be exemplary and give the start to large-scale privatization. So, two questions related to this. I would like to specify what will be the next step or the start for large-scale privatization. And do you believe that the situation that happened yesterday and today, that this is some personal challenge or some personal fault? Of course, we should state not success of privatization in this case, but we had the experience. So for 11 years, there were no large-scale privatization, so privatization of the plant is a political process, of course. And I believe that privatization of Obolenergo will be less politicized, but I believe that this privatization will happen, and that will be the flagman of privatization of Ukraine. So I'm ready to argue with you on this. There is such an impression, maybe it's not true, that you do not have support of the Cabinet of Ministers. No, it's not true. There is support of the Cabinet of Ministers, and I state once more that the process of privatization of the plant, it is very politicized, and there are many weird experts that express their opinion sometimes, and they provide wrong messages to the people. That's why we work in a difficult environment. And summer maybe was not the best time. It happened so that the main investors, key investors who applied, they were from Middle East, and there were some holidays, and some were concerned, and some of the investors even joked when this privatization will be postponed, and it wasn't suspended, and it was unexpected, and I would like to state that some of the serious investors, they hired their consultants at the last stage, and they said that please postpone the contest for 15 days. So I have the letters that can support this intention of the investors. So unfortunately, according to the law, we do not have such a possibility to extend the tenders for 30 days, and we want to reflect this in the new law. Maybe we will be able to introduce changes about 45 days, that we should have the opportunity to have more time. And we have support in this case from the side of the Cabinet of Ministers, and when it will be introduced in the agenda of this body. We spoke with the Prime Minister and his team yesterday, and we plan to provide the consultations and to learn lessons. And this week and next week, we will introduce some changes to the documents that we can do without Parliament quickly. And we will have the relaunch at the beginning of September. And I will ask the Parliament to change 45 days to maybe even 90 or 120 days to have more time and flexibility in this process. And I would like that we see this, the repeat of this auction in autumn. Vitaly Krzyzewski, what will be the mechanism of restructuring of debt? Will it be the negotiations with the arbitrary procedures? I won't tell you about it because these ideas are still at the initial stage, so I won't go into detail. And I would like to say that the side of the restructuring will be the Odessa plant, and this is the case of the port and the Oskim company, and they should have some deal, and the party of this transaction should be Naftogaz is one of the parties in this process. This is a reliable source of natural gas. That is 90% in the structure of cost of the company, and there are some details how it will happen. Maybe I will tell you about this next week. And so the sum of that is 193 million. 50 is penal fine, and several million percentage that can be accrued. But now we are speaking about the nominal value of debt, because fine and interest should be negotiated in courts, and some position should be reached on this. And this position depends on the lawyers of both parties. This is a normal commercial situation, and I wouldn't take it out of the context. And we're speaking about, some people say 200 million, others say 300 million. So I can tell you that we didn't lose this court hearing, so we have our position and we will insist on it. That's why this is one of the issues we should address in the nearest future. One question: in what way the state can guarantee to potential investor the issues of Northmer and of the previous contest? So the state only can do it in one way, to reflect the guarantees in the contract, to protect in such a way the risks of the investor in future, if such court hearings will be, and if there will be some harm to a foreign investor. So one last question, if you have one question. When this contest was introduced and included the advisors, it was shown that these advisors will help to create better conditions. And now we see that there are some lessons learned from this, why advisors didn't advise timely about these risks, how to face them. So we had discussions with the advisors, And some advisors, they said that we should put lower price, but we believe, and I believe, that we have a right value of the center price. It's about $500 million or even more. It is a fair price, and we negotiate the price, but the initial price for the auction. So this center price cost us money, and there is no doubt about it. And the matter is, when we start the auction with what sum, and we should include the number of investors who will take part in this contest. Some people believe that it is 700 million, others believe that 3,000, and because there are many risks, so there are many different opinions on this from different investors. Some believe that it cost about 400 million. So there is a range of views what is the true cost of the enterprise, and to establish the fair cost of the enterprise, we should find the starting price that for those investors who want to buy, so for those who want to buy this enterprise strategically and to work with it for several years and to expect fair price for this for the products in the market, but the fair price won't be this year, next year. And I became the expert in the field. We understand what happens and how it will be in the future, and this process is not easy. All the risks, we told you about the majority of risks, and now we will work on this debt, on the legal problems, and also on the price we were speaking with you about. So I don't see any criminal things in this. So we should get effective auction with the bigger number of participants. We wish you success, dear colleagues. The briefing is over. The next 2 years, Colonel Lysenko. Thank you.